Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Lee Ball, and I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer at Appalachian State University. So this is the Appalachian Energy Summit sponsored webinar series, and this is the first webinar series of our fall event. And today's series is focused on the UNC system in the state of North Carolina. The title is UNC System Energy Reduction Goals 2020 Update and State of North Carolina Energy Update. We have been doing the Energy Summit now for 9 years. And because of COVID, we did not have our annual summer event here in Boone at Appalachian State this summer. So instead of trying to recreate the summit online, we decided to host a webinar series this fall, and we're also looking at another webinar series in the spring. And thanks for joining us. We have so far 78 participants, and we typically have a lot of interest from the UNC system and the state of North Carolina, but we also have opened this webinar series up to the whole world. So if you're joining us from far away, welcome. The Appalachian Energy Summit was originally intended to be a place where we convened anyone interested in clean energy in the higher ed space and beyond, so that we could share best practices and get to know each other and try to solve a lot of the issues that we're dealing with as far as energy reductions, avoided costs, clean energy, renewable energy. So just a little ground rules to cover today. Everyone is muted, and we will have a Q&A session following both speakers. And so if you have a question that you want to ask, if you look down at the bottom of the Zoom on kind of right center, you'll see a Q&A tab. So please place your question in the Q&A tab, and then we will hopefully get to your question. And so our two speakers today are Reid Conway, and Reid is the Senior Energy Specialist for the state of North Carolina, for the State Energy Office in North Carolina. And we have Sushma Masemore, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy and the State Energy Director for North Carolina. Both of them are no strangers to the Appalachian Energy Summit. And we're just really excited that you're both here. And sorry, one more announcement. This webinar is being recorded. And at the end of the series, we're going to post the webinar recordings, and we will send an email to everyone letting you know exactly where to view those. So our first speaker, Reid Conway. There he is. Hey, Reid.
Hey, Dr. Paul, how are you?
I'm great. It's good to see you as always again. We really appreciate your willingness to always help us with the Appalachian Energy Summit and all of our events, and appreciate everything you do for the state of North Carolina.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ball, for the kind words. The State Energy Office and the Utility Savings Initiative continues to want to help drive energy savings here in North Carolina.
So without further ado, why don't you take it away, Reid?
Thank you, sir. With the cancellation of this year's Energy Summit, I was not able to share the normal UC update on where the UNC system and the affiliates are in achieving their energy goals. My presentation normally happens toward the end of the summit each year. And if you haven't seen my presentation before, then you are leaving the summit way too early. I am so happy to start the webinar series off with this information and the good news that I'm going to share. The folks who are not part of this webinar today are missing out on the initial presentation, but we'll be able to review it online once Dr. Ball and staff places it out there. Before I forget, all the data today includes the affiliates. Even though I may only say the UNC system, I am including the other affiliates in this. I know we miss seeing each other, and I have missed seeing each one of you, and would like to take a moment to thank you for providing your annual consumption reports, your updated strategic plans for those of you wishing to go after 1292 funds next year, and for those of you that provided your annual performance contract program updates. I just want to take a moment and thank you for all those timely submissions. It is my hope that you continue to find value with these reports and plans. It is because of your work and these reports that I'm able to pull this data together for today's presentation. Next slide. So as we move into the presentation, I want to always remind you that we have to maintain a balance between energy savings and the primary mission of each university. We all work to improve and maintain the highest quality learning environment we can, while at the same time making sure we don't negatively impact the safety and well-being of the building occupants. I had a recent conversation with a university energy manager who had been working with the dean of a program that was also a building manager, because the energy manager wanted to implement a new HVAC setback schedule in that building. When the energy manager went back a few months later to check in with the dean to see how the new schedule was doing, the dean had totally forgot about it. That's the best news we can hope for. That means no one even noticed or complained about the setbacks. The energy manager could see savings in the building, but the building occupants were comfortable. That's great. That's a win-win for everyone. Next slide. So just for your information, UC has reports that we have to get out too. Every 2 years, the Utility Savings Initiative compiles data to provide a comprehensive program report to the legislature about the UC program and its participants. We have a yearly report on the guaranteed performance contracts for all state agencies in the UNC system, and a yearly report on Governor Cooper's Executive Order 80 and how well the state agencies are doing at reaching that 40% reduction goal. And for your information, all of these UC reports are due December 1st, which means out of our hands by mid-October for internal reviews and comments. So with you submitting reports on September 1st, we create new reports from your reports. Without the data that each one of you provide in a timely fashion, we could not tell this story. Peter Drucker said, if you can't measure it, then it can't be improved. But you have to do something with the data. Data by itself does not save energy until you take action. Next slide. So let's talk about savings versus avoided cost. You may have heard this before, but I want to go through it again. When I talk to a county commissioner, a school board member, the general public, and I talk about energy savings, they're thinking actual savings, actual dollar savings, meaning there's a pot of money now available to do something else with. I know it's hard to believe, but not everybody thinks, great, now I have money to do more energy saving projects. They naturally don't think about reinvesting the money back in energy efficiency projects. Most think, now I have money to do other stuff. Now, if I talk about avoided costs, this is money that I would have had to come up with if I would not have done the energy improvements. So let's see an example. Let's say I changed out the lights from T12 fluorescence to LED in a building that was occupied 8 to 5 every day. I see a reduction in my kilowatt hours from the old bulbs to the new bulbs. Now think about what happens if the building goes to 24/7 operation. I will not see a savings in kilowatt hours on my monthly bill anymore, because now the lights are running all the time and using more energy. But if I calculated the savings based on the T12s and then compared that to the LEDs, I will see an avoided cost from what I should have been paying if I did not swap to LEDs. That difference is money I would have had to spend if I did nothing. Thus, the project actually has avoided additional cost. By the UNC system making energy improvements early on and continuing to make improvements and building better buildings, we are better able to handle things that cause utility bills to fluctuate, like changes in weather, occupancy, hours of operation, rate increases, and the like. We can help the effects become less severe. Most importantly, we can continue to show how good our energy program is working as we continue to grow. Next slide. So looking at the last 6 years of energy and water utility spend of the UNC system, you can see a continued decline. At the same time, on the right, you can see an increase of over 3 million square feet of new buildings at the same time. What you are doing in energy efficiency is making a huge difference. If you look at the bottom in red, you will see an actual savings from 2018-19 to 2019-20 by almost $9 million. If you were thinking that this is all COVID related, remember that we were already 9 months into a year before the COVID shutdown started, and most folks did not immediately move campuses into some type of shutdown mode. Next slide. So 9 years ago at the Appalachian Energy Summit, there was a group of folks that believed that the UNC system could reach a goal of $1 billion in avoided costs by the year 2020. Take a moment and think about that. In 2011, we thought we could reach $1 billion. Then added on to that was another goal to reach $2 billion in avoided costs by 2025. Let that sink in for a moment. $1 billion, and then $2 billion just 5 years later. So how many of you remember these goals? Raise your hands. Now keep them up so I can count. This is not a mandated goal, but a UNC goal. UC has provided some technical assistance and collected the data, but this is entirely your effort alone, the UNC effort. Each one of you are part of this goal, working together, sharing information, helping each other, lifting each other up. Since we did not have the summit this summer, I am here to share some really great news. Next slide. Say congratulations to yourself. You have reached the goal of avoiding $1 billion last year, a full year early. I am applauding your efforts. As you are watching this, stand up, take a bow, and then reach back and pat yourselves on the back. The UNC system did it. It's celebration time. Just let that sink in a minute. You met the first goal of $1 billion avoided cost a full year early. You worked so hard over the years and you have achieved this goal. I want each one of you to know that you worked together to achieve this goal. The summit and the sharing of ideas and information and breaking down silos helped achieve this goal. I am proud to be the one to tell you. I again am so proud of the work that went into this by each one of you. A few years ago at the summit, I stated that you are either reading about history or making history. Today, you are making history. Next slide. So not forgetting about goal number 2, we are well on our way to the 2 billion number. We're currently at 1.25 billion. We're getting closer to that 2 billion number, and I know we'll get there. Next slide. So to continue the good news, in October of 2018, Governor Cooper released Executive Order 80, calling for a reduction in greenhouse gases, an unprecedented move to increase the use of zero-emission vehicles, and called for a 40% reduction in BTUs per square foot by 2025. In keeping with the celebration, as of this year, 2019-20, the UNC system has reached a 40% reduction in BTUs per square foot. Do I hear cheering again? I so wish we could be in person and we could celebrate together. I would be expecting to see a standing ovation, a lot of hooping and hollering, what a celebration this would be. Now we just need to keep this moving forward and not backwards. We cannot let up. We need to keep working to see where we can go. Do you think 50% is achievable? I believe if we put our minds to it, it can be achieved. This is something we'll definitely want to discuss at next year's summit. Next slide. So I put together an estimated timeline a couple of years ago for achieving the goal, and y'all made that pretty much useless now. But in the case you were wondering if this was all COVID related, please look again at last year. That was not during COVID at all, and we were over 40%. I've looked through the reports this year and I've seen where you have some reductions due to operational changes due to COVID, and we have seen that you've had some additional usage because of COVID. I want to caution that just because we got here doesn't mean that we can coast. Next slide. So if you're wondering where everybody is right now, here you go. We have 10 schools that have already hit the mark and are moving the ball forward. And we have 5 schools that continue to be heading in the right direction. And we have 6 that need to be doing a little bit better. And please let UC know how we can be of assistance to help address and identify some areas for improvement on your campuses. Next slide. So here's a format that you're used to seeing from me, and highlighted in yellow are some key items. I want to specifically talk about the second yellow box. As you see, 52%. I know we talk a lot about energy, but I do not want to miss the opportunity to talk about water and water efficiency. Water is critical to everyday life and our existence. What you see is a 52% reduction in water usage per square foot across the UNC system to date. The overall reduction is huge. Do you also see that water is the fastest rising cost that we're seeing? It's almost tripled over the last 18 years. Think about this. I have a few schools that spend more on water than they do on natural gas. And again, at the bottom, you see I've highlighted the avoided costs to date. Next slide. I would be remiss if I didn't include a slide that talks about House Bill 1292 and the UNC system carry forward. With COVID, there was a larger request from the 11 schools, as you can see this year. And as a reminder, please make sure that you're doing pre and post measuring of projects that you're thinking about including in this year's 1292. I also hope that you're doing pre and post measurements of all energy projects, not just the ones for 1292. How else are you going to know if you're saving energy or not? How else are you going to be able to tell folks how much these projects are saving, and if you're not measuring and verifying the savings? As you all know, if you have any 1292 questions, just call me and we can work through them. Next slide. Here's the scatter graph I know you all like to see. Remember that when you're looking at this graph, you want your school to be moving down and to the left. Not included in this chart is UNC TV, and they skew the chart pretty badly. So, but take a look at the number of schools that are below 100,000 BTUs per square foot. That's why we're making these goals. Everybody is moving down and to the left. Next slide. While this is a celebration of good news, I would be remiss if I did not include one slide highlighting energy improvements that can be made. I borrowed this slide from David King at Western Carolina University that he used this week for our monthly agency energy managers meeting. We had David come in and talk to the agency energy managers about data analytics. UC continues to appreciate how the UNC system is always ready to help others and to share information. If you remember a few things today, remember this: knowledge of energy and how to save energy should be shared and not held onto. So let me say that again. Knowledge of energy and how to save energy should be shared and not held onto. As you can see, this slide is from the information gathered by the Pacific Northwest National Lab. This graph shows the highest potential savings with the lowest amount of effort. And over 40% of the buildings surveyed, PNNL saw that scheduling of equipment is the best thing that you can do to save energy. Thanks, David, for sharing. Next slide. UC has been changing over the past few years with folks retiring and moving on. And I'm so happy to have Julie, Tessa, and Matt on board. And we hope to be adding another position later in the year. As normal, we will be setting up meetings with each of you to go through your reports and strategic plans and look forward to finding ways to help you reduce energy. If you need assistance or have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, and please let us know how we can help. Next slide. Thank you so much for your time and congratulations on reaching these goals. $1 billion of avoided cost and 40% reduction in BTUs per square foot. The UNC system is showing the state of North Carolina and the nation that it can be done. Thanks. Have a great day.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Reid. So excited to share this information, and you're the perfect person to, to reveal our accomplishment. I had chill bumps the whole presentation as you shared this information. And thanks to everybody out there that have worked tirelessly on these efforts. I know that it's difficult work, and I know that you're largely under-resourced, but you're very creative, and it's great that we could all work together to share knowledge, to share information. Great shout out to David King for doing the work that you do and sharing your knowledge as well, and all of your peers. And it's just a really great day to be able to share this with everybody that's on the webinar. And we're up to 108 right now. So Reid, thanks again. It's an amazing accomplishment. We look forward to celebrating in person when we get back together next time, and everybody deserves a round of applause and pats on their back. So thanks again, Reid, for your time. So our next speaker, Sushma Masemore, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy and State Energy Director in North Carolina, is joining us and any moment.
Hi, Lee.
Hi, Sushma. Thank you so much for coming. I see your solar out the window, and I want to make sure we point that out. Very cool. I know you're really busy, and you have a hard stop at 3, so we're going to just get this underway. And if anyone has any questions, put them into the Q&A, and we'll have a question and answer at the end of this. Thank you, Sushma.
Thank you, Lee, and thanks to your team for setting this up. Hi, everybody. Happy to be here again. I presented last year, and it's my pleasure to give you a high-level perspective of where we are in the energy space. But first of all, I wanted to thank Reid and our team and Reid's championing attitude and his leadership to work with you all to advance this program. There's a lot of good news, but certainly there's a lot of work ahead of us. And hope to continue to make progress on that. I'm going to shift away to talk a little bit about where the state of North Carolina has been on energy planning. Next slide, please. So along with what you heard from Reid, the 40% target is part of Section 8 of the EO80. There are other directives under the executive order that our department has been working on with stakeholders and other state partners. I'll give you a highlight of that. And then I'll do a deeper dive into the clean energy plan that was released last September-October period. And there has been some activities on making progress towards those recommendations. And I've selected a few to sort of give you a breadth and a perspective of the things that might be of interest and that you can take home with. Next, please. So to recap, the Executive Order 80 is titled Our State's Commitment to Address Climate Change and Transition to a Clean Energy Economy. Collectively, it set some goals to reach by 2025 as a state, and that is to reduce our statewide or economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions to 40% below our '05 levels. As of 2017, we were already at 24% reduction. Business as usual gets us to 32%, and we're hoping that these policies and the direction we're headed would get us to that 40% target by 2025. Reid already mentioned the reduction in energy consumption per square foot to be at least 40% from the '02-'03 levels. That is a mandate to Governor Cooper's cabinet agencies, but the universities were the first to say we want to commit to this goal, to this level of reductions voluntarily, and our team is supporting and encouraging and championing that initiative. There's also a goal for the state to have 80,000 registered zero emission vehicles on the road by 2025. Next, please. So in between the Clean Energy Plan and other work that we've been doing in the State Energy Office of DEQ, we also an assessment of the climate vulnerabilities to our state assets and programs. And in order to do that, we felt like we needed a better understanding of what the climate science is telling us. So our partners from universities across the state stepped up and contributed to a year-long study. Dr. Kunkel from the North Carolina State University's Institute for Climate Studies led this effort. And I just want to let you know that this science report is here for us as citizens, as servants of the state, but also as business and local community partners. It contains a wealth of information on what the historical changes in North Carolina have been and what our projected climate looks like for 15 plus climate variables. The study's finding, to no surprise, provides some probability statistics on a variety of anticipated changes. But the key conclusion that the science report places is that we have seen large changes on our climate, much larger than any other time in our state's history. And then there is a very likely probability of 90 to 100% by the end of the century that these climate change variabilities will continue to occur under both our lower and higher emission scenarios. We have already seen a 1 degree temperature rise since 1900s, and our science study report says that we're going to see between 2 to 5 degrees between now and the end of the century under both the low and high emission scenarios. So if you're interested, there's a lot of factual information for both the mountain, Piedmont, and the coastal regions of the state. Next, please. The science report helped form the decision-making process and the evaluation of a risk-based methodology that we applied for all government agencies. This climate risk assessment resilience plan was released to the governor through the Climate Interagency Council in June. COVID-19 delayed the release of it, but the plan was ready to go in the March timeline that was set in EO80. And I'm not going to go into the details, but there's a significant amount of thought and analysis and partnership that contributed to this statewide evaluation of what is vulnerable, what do we value, how are communities' issues integrated into not only state planning, but also private sector and other public sector planning. There's an analysis of nature-based solutions that are related to securing our natural systems and built systems. And then there is a path forward chapter that says what are the different agencies going to be doing to actually implement this plan. Next, please. So I'm going to shift back to the Clean Energy Plan, which was released in October. We are in the process of implementing it at various levels. So just to recap, the plan stated a vision for a 21st century electricity system that is both clean, affordable, reliable, and equitable. It set greenhouse gas emission reduction targets for the power sector to achieve a 70% reduction by 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. It also set a goal to revise and review and modify our regulatory processes that enables cleaner energy resources to be affordable, to be accessible, that generates business opportunities for both our local, rural and urban areas of the state. And then finally, it also set more economical and business-driven goals to increase the deployment of clean energy solutions for our new energy economy. Next, please. The plan laid out about 45 or so recommendations, and within those recommendations, there are 75 or so individual action items amongst these categories, 6 categories that you see in these color-coded boxes. Each of these were designed after an intense stakeholder process. And if you could just click on the mouse a couple of times, I'll show you. Each of these arrows indicate activities where we as a department or other partners throughout the state have taken bits and chunks out of it and are implementing those actions that were identified from public sector to private sector and other entities. Next, please. And I'll go through a few of the larger initiatives that are stakeholder driven. The first is the recommendation in the category A, which was under carbon and clean energy policy designs. This work started in December. We launched it in Duke University Nicholas Institute, and the UNC School of Law is now facilitating and leading this analysis of different decarbonization pathways for the power sector. This is in preparation for a final report to the governor by the end of December that will lay out different policy methods for achieving the carbon reduction targets that I explained. So currently, this stakeholder group consists of a broad folks, stakeholder memberships, but also some targeted individuals that have been spending significant amount of time on a monthly basis, looking at coal retirements and alternative, what we call base case scenarios. Another is looking at market-based cap and trade or carbon market type of pathways. And a third is putting a carbon price adder into resource planning and potentially dispatching decisions. And then the fourth is a lot like a renewable energy portfolio standard that you may be familiar with, but it's a technology neutral clean energy standard. This is where many states are moving towards to enable technologies like battery storage and other yet to be invented and or developed technologies that could achieve the energy needs and decarbonization needs of the future. All of this work is being done to maintain and sustain the core values that we define in the CEP, and that the transition should result in reduction in emissions, ensure that we maintain affordability of our electricity system, and price stability. Grid reliability should be maintained, expanding clean energy resources in the process, and ensuring that social, economic, and environmental equity issues are accounted for in the process. So just a heads up, there was a public forum yesterday, and if you're interested, there'll be more in the future. Next, please. The second larger stakeholder process that started in February of this year is called the North Carolina Energy Regulatory Process. It's under recommendation B, but it stems throughout pretty much 80% of the Clean Energy Plan. And what this is a holistic new process where difficult conversations, problem solving is brought in a facilitated process. We have convened a group of about 40 folks from the government sector, from the private sector, from utilities, from the universities, from community activist groups, to engage in what is working, what needs to be changed, and why. And as a result of that, we are anticipating some work products that could result in legislative actions, actions by the governor, or decisions by the North Carolina Utilities Commission. We've had, I believe, 6 workshops, and our next one starts next week. And the goal here, again, is to produce policy proposals that folks in here, along with all of the people that they represent and the broader stakeholder community, can work to implement. Next, please. So the NERP process, or the North Carolina Energy Regulatory Process, even though all of these people are coming from different interests and different priorities, the top 3 priority or outcome that they voted and consistently agree upon is that we want to work towards achieving better customer value in both affordability and bill stability. We want to evaluate and refine our utility regulations so that our regulatory incentives are aligned with public policy goals. And we want to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. So these 3 primary outcomes, alongside of all these others that are listed here, are really what's driving the decision making amongst the work that's ahead of us. Next, please. So the group is looking at 4 large-scale utility regulatory reform activities. One is called performance-based rate making, PBR. I don't have time to go into the details, but maybe in the future we could do more deeper dives. Another is looking at wholesale competitive markets, such as a regional transmission organization, an RTO, or an imbalanced market that they're testing out west. Another is looking at options for retiring uneconomic assets, such as perhaps, as many studies have shown, and there's been some data that indicates that some of our coal fleet and perhaps some of our natural gas fleet could be stranded or are already stranded now and in the future, and that it may be cheaper to replace them with cleaner, more efficient, and more cheaper technology solutions. But removing those assets requires a financial program to recover the losses. So that group is looking at that. And then finally, an all-source competitive procurement group is looking at what we call an RFP process, that when the next resource need is identified, such as another power plant, that those needs are competitively procured through a process where the least cost market-driven solutions are brought to the table. Next, please. And alongside of those 2 stakeholder activities, we're also working privately with many universities, with organizations to develop existing programs to expand services to low and moderate income communities. We have tapped into funding options for increasing our weatherization assistance program. We're working with 3 utilities to pilot subscription models for community solar programs, and we've added more funding to explore additional opportunities with utilities and co-ops. We're expanding our manufactured housing program, the Upgrade and Save program, working with co-ops on efficient electrification. We're looking into PACE and pay-as-you-stay financing for customers as well as commercial businesses. And then we've already just recently started a small group on looking at an energy efficiency apprenticeship program and workforce development. So this is something that we would love to get involvement from North Carolina's university system, community colleges, to contribute to this effort. Next, please. And then finally, as I mentioned, that the storms that we've seen in the last several years are really an indication of what we're having to deal with and will continue to deal with in the future. So we are working with a variety of folks to evaluate how we value the energy system resiliency. And we're applying a framework that allows us to define some resiliency goals, not specifically from the utilities point of view, but from the community's point of view, on what the costs of doing A, B, C are, and the cost of and the benefits of alternative scenarios. So UNC, EPIC, and NC State Clean Technology Center, along with the utilities and our local government partners, are testing out this framework. We're hoping, as this has never been done in our state, and many other states are experimenting how to best integrate resiliency planning into decision making at the commission level, but also as a government and a societal level, because of the continued impact we're seeing to our businesses and our communities on weather-related events. So stay tuned on that. I'd love to inform you on what the study's findings are. Next, please. And then finally, we are exploring ways to fund some of these things. For the first time, the federal government is looking at infrastructure and resilient infrastructure communities. FEMA has announced a BRIC program, B-R-I-C. It's called Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. And there is a lot of interest in this. Here's some excerpt from it, the amount of funding that is slated for the first year. But this could form the basis for future funding. It focuses on capacity and capacity building activities that benefits the public good and communities with already experienced disaster events. But the key thing that I wanted to bring for the energy interest is, next please, is that they have defined these community lifelines, that projects that are submitted amongst any one or more of these community lifelines are considered priority projects, and hopefully that would get funded. So the energy lifeline is one of those. And we are working and looking for ideas of how best to bring some of these federal opportunities to the state of North Carolina. And would love to work with universities and co-ops. We've already started conversation with NCEMC. And this is an opportunity to explore alternative solutions for grid resiliency, like storage systems and microgrids, building energy and water efficient water and wastewater treatment facilities, looking at PVs and storage, and addressing other opportunities that protects our critical infrastructure. So I covered a lot. I think that's the end of my slide deck, and I'll stop for questions.
Sushma, thank you so much. I don't know how you keep track of all this stuff. It's amazing. Just the fact that you're institutionalizing all this work in the state of North Carolina is just so exciting, and just can't thank you enough. And we're just really proud that you're, down there in Raleigh working so hard on this stuff every day. It really means a lot to our work too in the UNC system. So I think that we'll take some questions, and Sushma, we'll go first with you because you have another appointment to get to. And you actually answered the question, how can higher education partners help with your efforts? So you mentioned a handful of examples. Does anything else come to mind?
Don't wait for us to come knocking. We are doing our best to reach out. We reached out for the CARES Act funding, and you all provided great opportunities and ideas. But I think looking forward, as we come out of COVID, there could be other stimulus funding. As I mentioned, the BRIC funding, there's other opportunities under what we call hazard mitigation planning. We need to look at the energy and fuel supply and how we use energy in a holistic fashion. and position ourselves so that we can run with ideas and concepts, whether it's experimental research or actually, shovel-ready projects. There's room for all of that. One quick thing is this work that we as a whole state have done in the last 2 years have put North Carolina on the map, especially related to disaster planning and resiliency planning. It has become one of we always get contacted by federal agencies to speak on and provide, contribute to their efforts. The BRIC program is one of them where they reached out to us. So I think that because of our history and our experience, we're often the leading state in solving these problems, and we can be role models for others within the state as well as outside.
Yeah, thank you so much for your leadership with that. So the other question that I have for you is, how is the UNC data presented in the EO80 annual report? Is it a separate section since UNC is not a cabinet agency?
Yeah, I would actually defer that question to Reid. We have developed an outline, and he's probably closest to how we decided to present those data sets. Reid, thank you.
Yeah, and what I would say, Dr. Ball, is yes, the UNC system will, and the information provided will be included in the EO80 report in a separate section so that we can highlight what the UNC system has already done as opposed to what the agencies are doing. Yes, it'll be highlighted specifically individually.
Great. Another question, does the resilience plan address water utilities, for example, development of reclaimed water systems?
So there is actually on the water infrastructure side and water resources side, there's a lot of work already going on through DEQ and the Department of Public Safety under NCORE, as well as the Division of Emergency Management. I'm not able to specifically speak to you about that, but the report has an entire chapter on water resources and water infrastructure. And we can follow up with you specifically, whoever asked that question, if you're interested in what the vulnerabilities were identified and which divisions and or government entities are focusing on those resiliency efforts.
Our good friend Mike Lazat, give you a shout out, asked that question from UNC Charlotte. Reid, question for you. What are some of the most common barriers that you're seeing to energy savings as you talk to energy managers and other professionals in the UNC system and really in the state?
Probably the leading barriers, Dr. Ball, are around having the authority to really pull the strings and do energy projects. Having energy managers with budgets to be able to do individual energy projects and to be able to have the authority to step in and do some of the quick payback stuff, not having budgets. And then, some of the locations, the energy managers are not full-time. And so they're wearing different hats during the day. And so often, sometimes the energy hat gets taken off and not put on, but every so often. And that's a sad part. And so the other barrier too, I think, Dr. Ball, I mentioned it in my presentation, was the fact that there's not enough measuring and verifying going on before the projects and after the projects to really tell the full story on how good some of these projects are actually doing. And if you're really doing a good job, then we need to tout it. Like I used David King in my presentation. I met with David a couple weeks ago, and he said that once they were over $100,000 in 1292 money every year, then finance actually stepped up and said, hold on, this is a big deal. We need to continue to do this. So, just telling that internal story sometimes is a barrier as well, because a lot of the energy managers, may feel isolated and not part of the big picture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, anyone listening, if you have an interest in learning more, contact Reid. He'll connect you across the system to people to help you out for sure, to help you tell that story and do the pre-post measurement that will help you with that. Would you say that there are 1292 funds that are not being, not being applied for?
You can see that on the slide. We only, there's 17 universities and 18 universities and 3 affiliates. And so there's a lot and we only had 11 go after 1292 money this year. That leaves quite a few people who aren't even participating. And so there's money being left out that nobody is going after.
That would certainly help people probably get their bosses excited about supporting this work. So another question for you, Reid. What are some of the low-hanging fruit that you see is making a big impact that people might not be focusing on?
I continue to be impressed with events to HVAC, which some of the universities like Appalachian and Western and some of the others are taking advantage of, that seamlessly takes scheduling software from other areas in buildings and puts it into the building automation system, to where the HVAC technicians do not have to sit there and create a schedule every time a room's used or not used. And, it's such a small expense and such a huge savings on an annual basis. In some of the strategic plans, both at Appalachian and Western, they tout that annually. And, normally the paybacks is in months versus years, just for that scheduling software to be put in some buildings where classrooms and other uses of buildings just continue to flow on a pretty regular basis. And again, that's why I put that P and an L slide in there. And there's a link in that slide to that article, and it continues to be setbacks going in and rescheduling, checking schedules, because they continue to get moved around and nobody goes back in and checks them. And that's how we get buildings running 24 hours a day when they should be shutting off at 10 or 11. And one of the other things I'd say too, Dr. Ball, is don't be afraid to coast buildings. So if you have a building that normally shuts off at 11 o'clock at night, take it back to 10:30 and let it coast for 30 minutes. And that takes over a full week of runtime off of that equipment every year. And that's huge if you're talking about the life of the equipment and you're talking about maintenance and then having to do a little less maintenance. But it's just something simple, but it's a huge energy saving.
Looks like we have a final question. We have time for one more question. So the UNC sustainability policy says all campuses have to have a transportation plan. Should it ask for other plans such as energy, climate, resilience to match up with state plans? Maybe
I would definitely say yes. In fact, we were on the call just last week with UNC Wilmington and talked specifically about the grid resiliency project, which is looking at the cost and benefits of the utility as it exists today, a modified system where we harden the grid according to Duke Energy's grid improvement plan. And then the third scenario where we put in more advanced alternative systems. And UNCW was able to give some very pointed examples of how Hurricane Florence affected their business operations, their services, their ability to reduce costs. In fact, they lost an entire building from the storm. They lost a lot of experimental data that needed to be replicated. They lost a lot of food. Their backup generators just were not sufficient enough for all the fuel needed to keep going for the 7 days or so they were out of power. And they can speak to more specifically, but they have already thought about it. And I think they're considering, how do they avoid something like that in the future? So I would say the conversation internally has started. The question is whether that, what we call a systematic risk analysis, has that been done? And you may not have the funding to do everything that you want, but time and money will allow you to prioritize those things that you value the most and that is as highest risk. And so the framework allows everyone to think that through. And also thinking and having a plan in place allows some shovel-ready projects to be funded either through state General Assembly funding, which has been supported, but also federal funding that I mentioned earlier.
Right.
And so I would add to that, Dr. Ball, is the universities prepare strategic plans on an annual basis. I would definitely see a benefit in including, a couple of pages on transportation, a couple of pages on recycling, a couple of pages on renewables, because at the end of the day, you're looking to have these strategic plans, part of the campus master plan at the end of the day. And by including some more information, it becomes a better plan than just straight energy and energy conservation. I think we need to holistically think about sustainability and some of the other things on campus beyond just energy.
I also wanted to,
go ahead.
I just wanted to add one more thing, is that we are seeing a situation where the community's lifelines are so separated. There are communities that rely on some centralized hub, whether it's a grocery store or a cafeteria at a university or a Walmart or something that allows people to just charge their phones or come in and have a pumping station that is working to fuel their cars, or in the future electric chargers. All of these things are contributing to the broader dialogue that when you are affected by a storm event, how do we work together, because we can't all work individually and be up and running as quickly as we want.
This has been great. Just so many good ideas, definitely spinning in my mind about how to continue our work, and we want to continue to share best practice. So with that said, thanks again for being a part of our first Energy Summit sponsored webinar. And the next Appalachian Energy Summit webinar is going to take place on Friday, September the 25th. So the topic is revolutionizing public transportation, battery electric buses, and we're going to have a representative from Proterra and the director of GreenLink from the transit system in Greenville, South Carolina. And after that, on October the 1st, we're going to have a program that is a sponsorship with the Business for Good that is part of the Walker College of Business here at Appalachian State. And our esteemed presenter is Dr. Rajat Panwar, and he's going to speak about corporate sustainability needs a paradigm shift. And after that, October the 8th, we're going to focus on optimization, and where we have Travis Smith, our principal at Smith Engineering. On October the 15th, we're going to refocus our attention to local government efforts, where we have Amber Weaver from the city of Asheville. She's going to be talking about sustainability and energy initiatives in local government from her perspective. And then on October the 22nd, we're going to talk about the principles of integrated project delivery, where we have one of the world's foremost experts on integrated project delivery, and Howard Ashcraft. And he's going to wrap us up for the end of the the webinar series. So we hope you can attend the rest of them. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or ideas for us, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.